8,000, and the list of countries reporting new cases is getting longer. Here in Israel, 7 cases in total. The government denying entry to dozens of foreign nationals from several countries. And Iran now reporting nearly 1,000 cases and 54 deaths. There are concerns that people are being infected in prisons. This woman, Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe, is a British-Iranian mother jailed in Iran on espionage charges. She believes she has the virus. She has not been tested, and we have not heard from the government there. Well, fears over the outbreak resulting in historic market lows. US President Trump has put Vice President Mike Pence in charge of his coronavirus task force. They are trying to calm investors and the public's worries. He spoke with CNN's Jake Tapper earlier.
Most people that contract the coronavirus, they will recover. They will deal with a respiratory illness, we'll get them treatment. But for people that have other conditions that would militate toward a worse outcome, that we could have more. We could have more sad news, but the American people should know the risk for the average American remains low.
It's Vice President Mike Pence. Well, there seems to be new cases everywhere you look. South Korea reporting nearly 600 new cases, bringing the total there to over 3,700. Nearly 2/3 of them linked to a single religious group. Paula Hancock's reports that the outbreak is affecting the nation's youngest and most vulnerable.
Well, Becky, we've had confirmation of the youngest patient yet here in South Korea. A 45-day-old baby has been confirmed with testing positive for the novel coronavirus. This, according to Korea's CDC. We understand the baby and the family is being quarantined at home at this point. And with these numbers rising all the time, we now know that around 60% of confirmed cases in this country are still surrounding and linked to this one particular religious group, Shincheonji. Now, they've come under tremendous pressure here and criticism from the public, also from officials, and they've been on a bit of a PR offensive this weekend, fighting back. I spoke to one of them this Sunday morning, and the first question I asked was, how did it take a week to get from making the link between the group and the virus to giving the full list of members to authorities?
We tried as quickly as possible to provide all the info the government has been asking for. Our administration efforts have been delayed, so unfortunately, we may not have lived up to the expectations of the people, but we did our best to provide it as quickly as possible.
The Daegu mayor is reporting your group to the police for omitting members' names and for hampering the fight against the virus. He clearly doesn't think you've been transparent.
On the 25th, our headquarters gave a list of all the members, including domestic and overseas. I'm sure the Daegu city also received this, and the KCDC. And we also gave the list of all those who have been educated at the centres on the 27th.
Mr. Kim, you say your group has been very transparent, but we know that 600 police officers had to be drafted to try and track some of the members down because they weren't answering phones. This slows things down. I mean, this is the accusation, that this has slowed down the fight to be able to stop the spread of this virus.
Within the list, we have those who are currently in the military, those who may be overseas for work, and those who have changed their numbers and failed to report it to us, and those who were unable to pick up their phone because they were busy. The authorities didn't take that into consideration and thought the members unreachable if they didn't pick up their phone twice.
The United States has also raised the alert level to the particular area of South Korea that's worst hit, which is Daegu and its surrounding areas in the southeast of the country. They've raised it to level 4, which means that Americans should not go to that area. Becky?
Paula Hancock's reporting for you. Well, new cases also sprouting up around Europe. France advising against cheek kissing, a very normal greeting there, of course. Our Ben Wiedemann is in Milan in northern Italy, the epicenter of what is the largest outbreak outside of Asia. And Ben, any evidence that Italian authorities are getting this thing under control, contained?
Certainly, if you look at the numbers, Becky, it does appear that they haven't been able to sort of slow down the increase yet. Yesterday, when the Civil Protection Agency reported their figures at 6 p.m. local time, it was 1,128. We're expecting new figures within the next hour and a half. And certainly there will be more, probably well over 200 at this point. Now, one disturbing statistic that has come out is that 10% of those who have been afflicted with the coronavirus are medical personnel, and that sort of numbers would suggest that the Italian authorities may have trouble in the future in dealing with. They also say they're going to have a problem dealing with new cases because they are running out of, at least here in the Lombardy region, they're running out of beds in the intensive care units. Now, looking across Europe, not only are the French advising their citizens not to kiss on the cheek, the Louvre, the most visited museum on earth, closed this Sunday. France has 100 reported cases and has seen 2 deaths. In Ireland, they saw their first case of coronavirus. In the UK, 12 new cases, and the government is considering the possibility of drafting retired doctors and nurses if the need arises. So it does appear that throughout Europe, coronavirus continues to spread and the medical services are challenged. Becky?
And Ben, away from Europe and into the Middle East and Iran, we know that has sort of become a petri dish, as it were, for the spread of this virus around this region that we are in here of the Middle East. Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe, the British-Iranian mother, jailed in Iran on espionage charges, says that she believes she has contracted the coronavirus. Ben, her husband saying that prison authorities are refusing to test her.
Yes, she's been in under arrest in Iran since 2016, accused of espionage. She's currently in the Evin prison, which is the largest prison in Tehran. And according to the Free Nazanin campaign, who had received a message from her, she is suffering from what appears to be the symptoms of coronavirus. She has a sore throat, occasional fever. She doesn't feel well. And it appears that the prison authorities are not basically checking her to see if indeed she has it. We understand that in the prison, the authorities have stopped face-to-face visits between family members and prisoners, but it does not appear that they are taking at least her case particularly seriously. And the situation in Iran is really one for concern. Now, officially, they report 978 cases of coronavirus and 52 deaths. That number of deaths compared to the cases is particularly high, well over the 2% that other areas have seen. And BBC Persian reportedly spoke to a medical official in Iran who says that the death toll is actually over 200. So obviously, Mrs. Zaghari-Ratcliffe's situation in that prison is cause for serious concern for her husband, Richard, and for all of the family. Becky?
Sure, of course. Ben, thank you. Ben Wiedemann is in Italy for you, reporting from there. Now, the impact on the Chinese economy can be seen literally from space. Satellite images show pollution dropping dramatically since the outbreak started as businesses and factories shut. Remember, we saw almost 800 million...
Check that out. That's their pollution ratio from January 1st to February. Looks like February the 10th or February the 23rd. So you see, airplane travel is causing a massive amount of greenhouse pollution that is affecting the drawback on destroying the ozone. And as the ozone's being destroyed, it's also causing problems pertaining to seeing outlandish weather-related incidences that is a contributing factor also to the atmosphere, the ozone. There's a difference in the weather and the atmosphere. So what you're looking at right there is a little of both. It's based around weather because it's so low that now it's considered weather instead of atmosphere, but it has a profound effect upon both. That is a significant difference just because of airplane access, aviation access. That, could you only imagine if you used to do that all over the planet? How significant that would be towards reversing the problems that we're seeing with global warming. I think it would be tremendous to see something like that. You know, in today's society, I'm really surprised that somebody hadn't figured out some sort of a method of traveling from one country to another on some sort of a high-speed rail, even over the oceans and the seas. I'm really surprised that somebody hadn't already developed something like that, or going maybe in the water at supersonic speeds rather than all this airplane travel. I don't know how it could be done, and I'm sure it would be very, very costly in doing it towards being able to travel under the water in kind of like a submarine, doing astronomical amounts of miles an hour, or maybe cables, big cables that you had set up over the ocean. You'd have to anchor them down to the ocean floor some way or another, but have big cables to where you would run like trolleys over these big cables over the ocean. I'm really surprised somebody hadn't already tried to do something like that. I'm pretty sure it would be very, very costly. But there's going to have to be some sort of element towards being in control of this atmospheric changes in regards towards a different method of transportation going from one country to another. There's going to have to be. Because whenever we see these type of results, just within, I'm going to say about a 6 to 8 week span, whenever we see these type of results diminish because of aviation being limited in their flights, could you only imagine what that would be like if that was to be done all over the planet? It would be phenomenal towards putting us back where we're supposed to be pertaining to our ecosystem and our atmosphere. And of course we know that that's only part of the problem.
Million people under some kind of travel restrictions in the past month or so. That is 1 in 10 people on Earth. Remarkable, isn't it? This is CNN. We'll be back right after this.
That was remarkable.
Right, 6 deadlock here. Continue. the vision for peace that President Trump announced in January of this year, providing some context as to where not the peace process might go next. But what's the part which is such a priority to you and for your party in that?
No, these are two things. Actually, this clause that you were talking about is not a major or even an integral part of the plan, and it talks about something that to me is immoral, and that is removing Israeli citizens, be they Jews or Arabs, from Israel to the future Palestinian state, and this will not happen if blue and white is in power. This will not happen. Actually, after a while, even Prime Minister Netanyahu said that this will not happen.
Will annexation happen if blue and white are in power? Anytime soon?
We see this, the Trump plan, which has many positive aspects as far as Israel is concerned, and in our view, we see it as a basis for an agreement between us, the Palestinians, and a regional agreement between us and the Palestinians and other stability-seeking countries
so
in the
region. So you're
region.
talking about Jordan?
I'm talking to Jordan,
right.
Saudi Arabia, Morocco, Gulf states, Egypt, and the PA. Okay, and maybe others. So
all of whom have said that they do not accept this Trump plan as things stand. And I know that Benny Gantz has talked about annexation needing the support of the international community. So he's kicking the can down the road, effectively, isn't he?
I think, and this is my personal opinion, that any unilateral move, be it withdrawal, like we did in 2005 in Gaza, or annexation, will be an obstacle to reaching an agreement. And blue and white says, and Benny Gantz says this as well, we will try to reach within the Trump framework the vision. And actually, when you read the paper itself, it is called a vision by the people who drew it up. If, according to this vision, we will try to reach an agreement with the Palestinian and the regional powers.
Just finally, and very briefly, you know that no one party is really going to change their minds when it comes to this election. So it is all about voter turnout. Coronavirus, 7 cases here. Is that going to prevent people coming out to vote?
I think there will be, and I'm beginning to see it in the social networks, a little bit of fake news attempts to dissuade people from coming. I praise the Prime Minister Netanyahu for calling people to go and vote. I don't think it'll be a factor in these elections.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
There are 2 parties in this election that will likely stand out above the rest. We've just heard from one of them, the Blue and White Party. In the next hour, we'll hear from the other. I speak to Likud Party member and former mayor of Jerusalem, Nir Barkat, right here on this special edition. To it is Syria's civil war, threatening a new chapter. Turkey's imposed deadline for the Russian-backed Assad government to withdraw from the Idlib province has now passed. Fatigue for Syria's endless conflict can't hide the enormity of this. Ankara and Moscow both looking for an end game. Well, in a move to pressure the European Union for support, the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has followed through on his threat to open his borders, now encouraging refugees to cross into Europe from Turkey through Greece. Well, our Damon joins us from the Turkey-Greece border where all of this is unfolding. And Alwa, you reported on the European refugee crisis back in 2015, following families on their journey from Syria into Europe. Are we now looking down the barrel of a second European refugee crisis?
Becky, when you look at some of the scenes here, it really does feel as if we have gone back in time to those years, but the dynamics right now are very different. The likelihood of Europe reopening its borders is very slim, but as as you were saying, people have been encouraged to move up here. The IOM is estimating that some 13,000 refugees are living like this on the Turkish side of the border with Greece. And when they try to cross, it's very clear that Greece is not going to allow them.
They just spent a night cold and wet out in the open. And for what? A sliver of hope sparked by Turkey saying it would no longer stop refugees crossing to Europe and facilitating their transport here to the border with Greece. Abdullah is the sole survivor of a bombing that killed the rest of his family in Syria.
They thought it was open. They thought the whole border was open.
It's not. Greece is not letting anyone through.
But it's quite chaotic. It's quite intense. People are just trying to bust through towards what they think is going to be a better life.
Europe doesn't want them, never really has, striking a financial aid deal with Turkey back in 2016 that it never fully paid up on to stem the refugee flood. Turkey, hosting upwards of 3.5 million refugees, mostly from Syria, has long threatened to open the gates if left to shoulder the refugee burden alone. And now, Turkey is even more angered by the West's refusal to support it in Idlib with anything more than rhetoric. Many here are aware they are being used as leverage. The tear gas wafts over and mixes with smoke from multiple fires as those here try to stay warm. Samira's husband was killed in Iraq by ISIS. She came to Turkey with her children, elderly mother, and disabled brother. Where are we supposed to go then, she wonders. This Syrian mother doesn't want to talk. When we ask how she's doing, she just strokes her child's face. It's all horribly reminiscent of the desperation we witnessed years ago as throngs crossed through Europe. At night, we meet some of those who tried to cross the river to Greece, but failed. Greek authorities deny this, but Khalid from Idlib says the Greeks forced him back, tore up his ID, and took his phone.
He hasn't spoken to his parents in almost 4 weeks. And they're in Idlib, they're in the camps. He's worried about them. And now he has no way of getting in touch with them.
This family from Afghanistan says the same thing happened to them. But even worse, they were separated from their men.
Her father, your brother, her husband, are over there. And you're stuck here.
They are scared, vulnerable, alone, burning discarded clothing, not knowing where to go or how to find those they love. What are they supposed to do when their misery and desperation has become little more than a political weapon?
Oh, this is gut-wrenching stuff, and so many of these refugees, of course, are young kids. I mean, a real sense of hopelessness here. What do they believe happens next?
Well, they're not sure, and that's why they all are waiting around. I mean, look, they're getting ready to spend another night here. There's a number of, fires that are burning, and the issues that they don't want that perhaps Greece is going to open the border. Some of them say that no matter what happens, they'll wait, they'll try, because they do believe that this right now is their only chance. And there's a lot of frustration because, especially those who come from Syria, Becky, they know the game. They know that their fate is not in their control. They know that they're being used as political leverage at this stage. What they still struggle to understand is how it is that the world continues to watch what's happening in their country, what's happening to them out here, and fails to act. Look, we've been talking to a number of Syrians here, and they have all said to us, if somehow the war would end, if we thought we could go back home and not be detained by the regime, we would get on a bus and go back there immediately. We're not here by choice. But there is this sense right now that they're just going to be left here to wait, that they're going to continue to be stuck in limbo until the greater political dynamics somehow sort themselves out.
Lest we forget, this is the real story of...
They're basically being held prisoner. captive.
The ground. Meantime, what is going on so far as the politics is concerned?
It's a very complicated situation, Becky. Look, Turkey wants to get more support for what it's trying to accomplish inside Syria. It wants to see, at least at this stage, the regime forces pushed back to the borders of what was the originally negotiated upon, demilitarized zone that encompassed the province and some of the surrounding areas. Of course, over the last 2-3 months, since the beginning of December, the regime backed by the Russians and the Iranians has really pushed forward into and forced around 1 million people to move towards the border with Turkey. There's a massive humanitarian buildup crisis happening inside Syria that we have been reporting on regularly, and what you're seeing here is directly tied to that. Turkey is using its refugee population to try to pressure Europe. Turkey, President Erdogan has said that they are not going to close down their borders, that their borders are going to remain open. What does that mean for the people here, Becky? Throughout the day, they move from one different location on the border to another. They get encouraged to move in certain directions, and then they try to cross, and they get pushed back more often than not. Many of them, like you saw in the report that we just aired, say that when they do manage to get across, the Greeks end up forcing them back. They're stuck, and right now at this stage, even though we are expecting a meeting to take place between President Erdogan and Putin at some point next week, at this stage, until Russia and Turkey resolve what's happening in Syria, if they're even able to do that, these are among the many people that are going to end up having to live like this to a certain degree because they're stuck in the same way that the population inside Idlib itself is also stuck.
One can only imagine the impact on not just the adults around you, but particularly on those kids. Thank you. Our Damon is on the Turkish.
The average American that's been so spoiled would be lucky to go through 2 days, possibly 3, of that type of a drooling circumstance. They would be crying, screaming, I want to die, become suicidal and everything else after living in conditions like that for 2 or 3 days. Those people are in drooling circumstances that goes beyond most American human imaginations. And it's one thing to go camping. To go camping. Most people go camping whenever it's right there in that suppresses where it's not too cold and it's not too hot. It's basically perfect conditions to go camping. They may think, "Oh, I'm an outdoorsman. I can endure that." Those people aren't enduring perfect conditions. They're enduring freezing conditions. They're enduring muddy conditions. They're enduring people being sick conditions. They're enduring some of the most harsh conditions that are probably upon the planet right now. As I've stated, and I'll state again, the average American in today's society could only withstand about 2 or 3 days of that. And then after that, they'd be wanting to check out. Because it's harsh. You got to be callous to something like that. Kind of like a homeless person that lives out here on the streets. 90% of them, if they're truly homeless people, you'll look at them and you can tell that their skin is like leather, and their whole demeanor of how they look is totally different than the person that's been accustomed to living indoors or living in perfect conditions pertaining to it, the atmosphere being just right. It's sad. It's a heartbreak over there. There's no other way of looking at it. It's just heart-wrenching to see the conditions. So sad. So sad.
Greek border as the Syrian war escalates with no end in sight, it seems. Over in Afghanistan, America's so-called forever war could soon be winding down. Taking a very short break, back with that after this.
Still
Europe demonstrations. What about
Welcome back. You're watching a special edition of Connect the World. Well, it's been called the graveyard of empires, and it's not hard to see why, even in today's modern world. After 18 years, America looking to wind down its Afghanistan war. It has cost thousands of people their lives and trillions of dollars. But now, after nearly 2 decades of fighting, the US and the Taliban signing an historic agreement, paving the way for foreign troops to leave Afghanistan within 14 months. Remember, America went into the country originally to obliterate the Taliban's rule. Our Nick Robertson is in Doha, where this historic agreement was brokered. So, Nick, what has changed to have allowed this deal to work?
A cynic would say it's been a war of attrition. The Taliban would have said that's what the United States was going to get when they went into Afghanistan, because, as you say, it's been a graveyard for, it's often described as a graveyard for empire. Certainly the Soviet Union found that out. But what has changed is there's a reality. The Taliban understand that they can't fight their way to victory. Even if they did, they'd continue to be pariahs. The United States has recognized, and certainly under President Trump has made it a campaign promise to get troops out of Afghanistan, that it's just bleeding the country of money with no visible gain in Afghanistan. So a compromise has emerged. Certainly there isn't trust. Certainly this isn't a quick page turn to a massive peace deal. One of the sort of interesting details about being here in Doha is hearing all the different places that the next round of talks could take place in. They could take place in Doha. It could be Berlin. It could be Oslo. It could be Moscow. It could be Malaysia, because all of these are up now as countries that could help host the next round of talks. In Doha here, though, it's the Qataris that have put a lot on the line, hosting Taliban leaders for the past 7 years, getting them, if you will, to a point where they can sort of open their front door to US negotiators a year ago, and now expect to be part of the verification process that will make sure the Taliban do their part of the deal, which is go after Al-Qaeda and ISIS. The Qatari foreign minister explained to me his country's role going forward.
In the agreement, there are specific criteria that shows and demonstrate how they can be able to prove that they are going to sever the ties with Al-Qaeda. And there is an operation room which is located here in Doha that will be held jointly by the US and Taliban and the observation of Qatar, to make sure that all the parts of the agreements are adhering to these commitments.
What convinces you that the Taliban have changed from the people they were before, who thought they could fight their way to victory?
Well, it's not a matter of what's convinced us, but it's really a matter of how we can make sure that within the agreement there are clear measures that identifying how we can monitor this agreement in a way that's delivered by both parties. All of us, we have stay watching. We have to keep our eyes open, and to make sure that the agreement is implemented and everyone is adhered to the commitments he put in himself.
And the role of Qatar to help oversee that, to help administer that, to help monitor that change, how would that role work?
Qatar will be a facilitator in this. Will make sure that if there is any disagreement between the parties throughout the implementation of the negotiation, that we can look at it and advise both parties to have a solution in these disagreements and these hiccups, which we expect to have in the future. But we spend a lot of time during the negotiation in making sure that the agreement is clear and the criteria are clear to be fulfilled by both parties. And when we are talking specifically about the counterterrorism criteria, which is regarding Al-Qaeda and the others, there are clear mechanisms for this to be monitored and to be implemented. And if there is anything goes wrong, we believe the entire agreement will be in jeopardy because all of it is interconnected together.
So that's it. You hear about the firm commitment there that the Taliban are going to be held to over Al-Qaeda. But what's not in the agreement between the United States and the Taliban is any mention of women. That's something that will be hashed out between the Afghan government and the Taliban as part of the intra-Afghan talks. That at the moment is expected to happen early March. There are some hiccups on that because of exchange of prisoners. But this issue of women is an important issue to so many people around the world because of the way that the Taliban treated women when they previously ran the country 2 decades ago. And I put that to a member of the Taliban who's been in these negotiations. Interestingly, he says that Afghan women will no longer have to wear the all-enshrouding burqa. This is what he told me. Will it have a new constitution, this new government?
Yeah, sure. I think they must have.
Well, this will be a turnaround. Listen to this.
Constitution, new constitution. If they continue with that, that means the constitution of the occupation time. So it will not have credibility and trust of the people.
What guarantees are you going to give in that constitution for the education of women and the role of women in society?
Yes, about the role of women, their education, because women want to have education, and women want to have right of work. We do not have any problem with that.
And education up to which age?
Yeah, no problem. Which the higher, even higher education, that's not the problem.
Higher education for women?
Yeah. Only the issue is the Islamic hijab they observe, because it is an Islamic society.
There's a long way to go on this, Becky. I mean, clearly the Taliban and the Afghan government are coming from this completely poles apart. The Taliban see the Afghan government as really a quisling government, a government that's being propped up by an occupying force. And the Afghan government is an Islamic republic. The Taliban want to call themselves an Islamic emirate. They are a long way apart right now, Becky.
A long way apart, says Nick. But a chink of light, at least, in one endless war. No sign of the end of the conflict here between the Israelis and Palestinians. Things more entrenched than ever, if anything, experts say. We know that one of Benjamin Netanyahu's election promises is to annex parts of the West Bank and the Jordan Valley, something Jordan has strongly condemned. On Saturday, former Israeli Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman claimed that Mr. Netanyahu informed Jordan's King Abdullah he would not go through with the annexation pledge. In response to that, the Israeli Prime Minister called Lieberman's comments, quote, crazy talk. Well, Jordan plays an extremely unique and important role in this region and indeed the conflict. And that is why I sat down with the country's Prime Minister to get his perspective.
The Jordanian hope, and maybe even the Israeli at the time, was for it to lead to a comprehensive solution at the level of the region and sustainable peace and all of this. Unfortunately, none of this materialized. So yes, today we're at the kind of lowest level of in the relationship that has been since signing the peace treaty.
Is the peace treaty at risk?
Well, the peace treaty can go into a deep freeze mode, and therefore it's definitely at risk.
My vision presents a win-win opportunity for both sides, a realistic two-state solution that resolves the risk of Palestinian statehood to Israel's security.
Are you concerned that there is a price to pay for not supporting that deal by facing economic pressure from the US, which of course provides Jordan with billions of dollars in economic aid?
Jordan's relationship with the US are deep, historic, and strategic. And they've been such with all US administrations, the US House and the US Senate and the US people. We're not worried that that strategic relationship will be affected.
Did the US discuss with you the details of this plan, which, by the way, includes some very specific projects that Jordan would benefit from?
None of the elements of this were discussed with Jordan prior to its announcement, and we never will mix the political aspirations with financial deals.
You face a tough task balancing international donors, a frustrated population. Jordan's debt to GDP ratio is just under 100%, an unemployment rate of just under 20%. That's the highest in 25 years. You say you have a plan. So what is it?
What we have is a 5-year plan that would put our economy on a sustainable path, given everything that we've inherited. By the way, what got us into this very bad situation to begin with, the closure of borders, the refugee crisis, the aftermath of the Arab Spring.
Or was it mismanagement and corruption of the economy that's got it into this mess?
That is a legitimate question. We have created all the necessary institutions and given them all the independence to look into corruption cases and fight them. But if you look, sheer number, the cost of the interruption over the Egyptian gas, the cost of absorbing 1.3 million Syrian refugees.
These oligarchs, man, they're just God.
That's 20% of Jordan's population. Can you imagine a country that absorbs 20% of its population overnight and stays, solvent? What we worry about is people are impatient, and we understand why they are impatient, because it's been 10 years since the economic slump.
It's been longer than that, pertaining to your old methods and your old practices. Just like not giving women the right to have education and keeping them pinned up like slaves to the point that they couldn't even show their face. These old methods and traditions over there are just evil. They are absolutely evil. Evil, demonic oligarchs that want to control their people and keep them under subjection like this. This is worse than communism ever thought about over in Russia or China or Cuba.
Refugees and the whole regional situation. And unemployment is up. Unemployment among youth is up. And
now, why is that? I'm going to tell you why. Because it's got to do with favoritism. That's exactly why. That's exactly why.
It's very hard to convince a young, educated, creative young man or woman to say, well, can you wait another 4 or 5 years?
What happens with the economy will have an effect on Jordan's security and stability. And its stability is important to Israel and around this region to many of America's allies. How concerned, sir, are you?
We live in a troubled neighborhood, and we've been at the receiving end of this trouble since day one. And Jordan has become extremely resilient, both politically and economically. It's not a coincidence that we've seen countries 10 times the size of Jordan and 10 times the economy of Jordan collapse and turn into failed states, unfortunately. Jordan did not. The reason is there is a certain, I'd say,
ambition,
political culture that has developed in Jordan, where the population is united in many, many ways. We agree, we disagree, but there is unity behind the Hashemite rule in this country.
Well,
Too many
let's see it
plans
then.
tried to pressure Israel to withdraw from vital territory like the Jordan Valley. But you, Mr. President, you recognize that Israel must have sovereignty in the Jordan Valley. You are recognizing Israel's sovereignty over all the Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria, large and small alike.
Critics of the Donald Trump Middle East plan for peace,
And rightfully so,
sympathize with Jordan's position, say that this is a plan that provides an existential threat to Jordan. And we know there is rhetoric from the Israeli right, which has been alluding to an eventual population transfer of Palestinians to Jordan. Jordan is Palestine, goes the saying from them. Can you comment on that?
We don't support or agree with, of course, these statements about Jordan is Palestine or the transfer. These are extremely dangerous, and not just for Jordan. They're dangerous for the whole region. They're for the stability, etc. So it's really playing with fire in a region that's already in a tumultuous situation. So
riddled with calamities. The whole region. Because of the oligarchs. Because of people not willing to sit down and listen and compromise.
it's pushing things in the wrong direction, and we cannot be but totally opposed.
Yeah, the Jordanian Prime Minister speaking to me in Amman yesterday. We are live from Jerusalem, where another challenging day is ahead for Benjamin Netanyahu. He and the rest of Israel going to vote for the third time in less than a year. We're going to hear from his Likud party next about whether this time will be different. Plus, I'll speak to Arab-Israeli politician Ahmed Tibi, the man who has been like a thorn in Benjamin Netanyahu's side this election.
Boy, oh boy, what thorny issues over there pertaining to, I'm going to call them kingdoms. They're set up like kingdoms. And one kingdom versus another kingdom has caused havoc upon so many innocent lives, just like the people over in Syria. That is just absolutely so heart-wrenching to watch. So devastating in thinking that people is actually having to endure such conditions like that in the 21st century. It goes beyond my craziest imagination. That would be like going back to the 1600s here in America and how the Native American was being hunted down like a wild animal, even up until the Trail of Tears and other big battles that went on out west. Wounded Knee and stuff like that. It's hard for me to imagine people that still lives in conditions like this because of the kings, the oligarchs. And of course, whenever you tie the people's hands to the point that they become defenseless in defending their own statehood or righthood in these areas, it just becomes so stagnated of seeing how that these tribal dictators have brought so much hardship upon to their own people. It's just absolutely unbelievable how that we're seeing this in the way that we're seeing it. And you would have thought that after 30 years has gone by, 30 plus years of ending the Cold War, pertaining to the calling down the evil dictatorship of Russia, towards calling it for what it was, pertaining to nothing but evil. You would have thought that the rest of the countries, that the rest of the world would have tagged along by now. But even our own, I'm going to repeat this, even our own backyard to our own neighbor, which is Mexico, basically does the exact same thing to their people. They just do it in a different way. So sad to see where these dictators are using one form or another to bring oppression over their people. You know, down in Mexico, they're using drugs to bring oppression over their people. And that's exactly how they're using it. But they're bringing oppression over their people. Let my people go. Those was the words of Moses to the pharaohs over in Egypt over 4,000 years ago. And we're still seeing that same type of aggression, that same type of bondage over innocent men and women and children's lives.